Right, well, morning all. We made some real progress now on the gearbox. In this instalment, I cover off the Epicyclic Selector, putting the seals in and refitting. So that means that now, obviously it's fitted now, so that means that now the back end is fitted and we just got the front end of the box to sort out. Great stuff. Right, we've got the range change selector in the vise. We're going to start pulling that down. So when I bought this lorry in Belgium, it hadn't been run for a little while. It had been run, but it hadn't been run for a little while. So I fueled it up, a couple of €100 worth of fuel in it, and off we set. Now I got onto the motorway, and not having driven the lorry, I wasn't just, and the speedo wasn't working, I wasn't just sure of what gear I was actually in, but I was in the overdrive position and we were going reasonably well, so I'd assumed that we were in overdrive. Anyway, as we were travelling, all of a sudden there's a really loud grinding and banging noise, and obviously I'm on the right hand side of the road, on the right hand carriageway of the right hand side of a 2 or 3 lane road now, I can't remember. What I do remember is looking sideways at the central reservation barrier and pulling it back and looking at the hard shoulder, the power steering going on the lorry, and I managed to coast it onto the hard shoulder. And when I coasted it onto the hard shoulder, I'd lost the engine basically, I'd lost power, and it was just stood there. So my mate ran up, who was following me, and sort of said, what on earth's gone off? And I said, I don't know, I think I've just seized it up. So at this point, I'm considering my options. I've got a lorry with a potentially knackered engine, 500 miles from home in a foreign country, and we're on the hard shoulder, the lorry's in a safe place, and I sort of thought to myself, well, I could put this down to experience and do a runner because I paid the guy cash for it. But anyway, so I tied the key and she started up lovely. So I said to my mate, we're gonna crack on. So I went up through the box, and it soon became evident that the overdrive had started to work, and I think what it was this was seized up. So we got on the boat, got to Maidstone Services, I blew the tyre up at Maidstone Services, and I came out of Maidstone Services, put it in overdrive, and I went from Maidstone Services to Cambridge at about 70 mile an hour all the way. We just never stopped. Got to Cambridge, I don't know, probably had an hour at Cambridge, set off out of Cambridge and we were back to 45 mile an hour. And again, same thing, going up the road, probably about 20 minutes after we'd started off, it gradually slipped into overdrive and we were away again. Markham Moor, it never bothered at Markham Moor, and we came over Woodhead and into Manchester. So I think the problem we've got is she's seized up properly now, and obviously we need to pull that to bits. Interestingly, there looks to have been some welding work on that fork. There's certainly something gone off on there. Looks like it's had some hard facing put on it. Let's get in bits and see what we find. That actually potentially looks like a shim. Well cut, could be factory. Right, so this is the indent for the selector rod. Once you've selected the fork position with air, the indent stops it travelling just like on any normal gearbox. If I'm honest, I suspect that could be where some of the stiffness is. I think we need a bigger arm. There's the ball bearing. Oh, she's absolutely filthy, look. Everything needs a really good clean on here. Right, we'll just get the rest of these fittings out now for the clean up. Obviously being really careful because we don't want to do any damage. Of course, the big problem with these older fittings is there's not any flat spots on them. We've just got this other plunger to pull out. Yeah, she's quite... it's got an O-ring inside to get as well. So we've got some O-ring shopping on, boys. Right, well I think as you can see we've done our O-ring shopping. So we've got the large O-ring for that sort of boss plunger thing. We've got the two that go inside it, the two shaft seals. This seal here is for that plunger that goes in that tumbler there. But I wanted to just draw your attention to these before we start assembly. If we look closely at that one, I don't know whether I can get it to focus, you can see that it's got a ridge in it, and this is what's known as a quad seal. That varies to a standard, obviously, O-ring type seal. My mate Richard has fitted these to his Epicyclic Selector and says that they work well, and the guy in the shop also recommended them, which is why I've gone with them. But he also brought a backup set. More expensive, obviously, than a standard O-ring. They're £1 a piece. I think these were something like 30p each. But we'll see how we go on. These are the actual ones that I fitted in the Fleetmaster, and the Fleetmaster works perfectly, but I'm just interested to see how the quad seal goes on. Morning all. We're just going to have a quick hour on this, just to see if we can get some assembly done before I go to work. Currently helping out in transport. and working the late shift, which means that we can do some gearbox building in the morning. So the first thing I want to do is get the studs into this casing, get that rebuilt. It's cleaned out, we've got its O-rings, and yeah, let's get it built. So I'm just winding these studs in with 2 nuts. We don't need to be using the stud tool for these, not over tightening them. They've not got any Loctite or anything like that on them. If I have to strip this down again, I would rather that it brought the stud out with the nut than took the thread out. Obviously done the same at the other side, I'm not going to show you that. Okay, I'm just going to put a bit of rubber grease on the end here just to stick the gasket on. Obviously the gasket's slightly oversized. I always trim them after, once the assembly's complete, and just trim round with a Stanley knife or something. So I'll just trim around that when I put my bolts on in a bit. Right, we've got both of the supports in now for the selector rod. We've obviously got the studs fitted. We've got those first gaskets fitted. So we'll move on to getting some O-rings fitted. Right, we're going to start with what Foden term the inner piston. So obviously got this O-ring on the outside. It needs to come off. Not terribly badly worn, it has to be said. So that's that one, and then it has these 2 inside. Right, so we're going to start with the 2 internals. Got these from AS Bearing Supplies in Buxton. Very fortunate to have them so close by. Everything's obviously been really thoroughly cleaned up. Again, we're applying rubber grease. We don't want to be building this up dry. And that just fits in there. Right, so we'll get these seals sorted now for the outer piston. And this is where we're going to use the quad seal rather than a standard O-ring. Gone in nice. Right, next job is to get the shaft in and the selector fork in. Now, I've just given the shaft a bit of grease just to ease the ways. Right, that's the first bolt in. Annoyingly with these, you can't get the bolt in from the back without a lot of messing about. Nut's obviously been well chovelled up, It's obviously been in and out a few times, that, so I'm going to clean that up before I refit it. Lovely, that's tidied that up beautifully. They've got a crimped end on these, so they obviously crush. I wouldn't want to put a nylock in there because of the heat that the gearbox generates, and I am going to put some stud lock on, but you know, ultimately these are original fasteners, and this is about restoring the vehicle, not fitting new parts. Going to give it a little bit of mild thread locker. The last thing we need is the nut going for a walk around the gearbox, isn't it? And that's that one done. Right, with the fork fitted, we can now get this side of the air system on. So first job is to get the seal replaced on here. So let's get on with that. All in pretty fine fettle. Barrel's had a really good clean in there, obviously. And the big thing to be careful of here is that we don't nick that seal. There's a groove at the top where the circlip goes in. So the circlip on these is quite an interesting thing. It's not as we imagine a circlip today. This is a spring piece of steel. Now, I don't know whether that is because you know, modern circlips, as you'd call them, hadn't been invented, or it was just Foden's way. They're a pain, I know that. Yeah, nearly there. Here we go. And that stops the plunger coming out. Plunger has a little air hole there, so when air's sent via that middle, well, it's not on here, so when the air's sent via the middle port, it pushes this out. That's lovely. If you look on the end of this bushing, we have got some wear, and that's where the shuttle outer piston has been going up and ramming against that shoulder, and I do wonder whether this shim has been put in for that reason, because I've not seen this shim before. So I'm going to put it back in for now because I don't want to lose it, and then I'm not convinced we've found the reason for the range change problems that I was having, because I think this has actually been serviced at some point. It's a lot freer than I expected it to be. So I think we've either got an air problem or an adjustment problem on the range change. I'm really pleased overall with what I've found in here, but I'm going to refit this shim anyway. That should be okay. Let's get the indent in. I'm going to find a copper washer for that. Well, Epicyclic Selector's back together. It's just about ready for fitting to the gearbox. What I want to do is just give it a dry run with air just to make sure we've got some movement. So let's see how we go on. I'm just using the nozzle off the compressor. Bit difficult to get the air to all the ports, but I think you can see she's rattling through all right, isn't she? Now the compressor's cut in. That'll do us. Well, we're now ready to fit the selector for the Epicyclic to the gearbox. You'll notice here that I've put the groove on the dog in the middle of the range, so roughly in direct range, just to give myself a fighting chance. I've slackened off the indent on the selector itself, and I've put the fork in the middle just to make things easier for fitting, and we can tighten everything up then. So let's get it in. Not putting anything on the gasket, it's not under pressure. It's a proper flexoid, you know, gasket, paper gasket, so it should be fine. Just going to put a nut on temporary and get the spring washers for it. And obviously just going to take it up nice and even on the studs. That'll do.